There was a time when survival itself was the recipe. No supermarkets, no stocked shelves, only scraps turned into strength. These weren't just foods, but lifelines, shared by firelight, carrying memory, defiance, and a resilience that still lingers today. Cornmeal. Golden grit, ground fine. Cornmeal was the backbone of daily life. Ash cakes were pressed by hand and baked in the coals. Pans of cornbread rose in heavy skillets. Morning mush simmered low for children before first light. It was cheap, dependable, and endlessly adaptable, turning a handful of grain into bread, batter, or porridge. For enslaved families, cornmeal wasn't garnish. It was continuity. Knowledge moved mouth to ear, how thick to stir, how long to bake, how smoke could make simple food taste like a feast. With scraps of fat or a splash of syrup, it became comfort after punishing days. Cornmeal stretched rations, carried people through lean weeks, and taught a hard lesson. Abundance is a skill. Today, we call it humble. Back then, it was the difference between hunger and enough. When the pan ran dry, a dark sweetness stepped in. Not luxury, but energy in a jar. Salt pork. It was salty, tough, and far from tender, yet it kept families alive. Salt pork was one of the most common rations on the plantation. Its slabs preserved to last weeks without spoiling. Boiled into stews, fried crisp in pans, or mixed with beans and greens, it gave flavor to otherwise plain meals. For many, this was the only taste of meat they knew. The charm was obvious, but so were the problems. Too much salt left mouths dry and bodies weary, yet its presence meant strength for another day's labor. It wasn't delicacy, it was endurance. Even the smell of it sizzling over a small fire carried a reminder of both hunger and survival. But if salt preserved life, the next food sweetened it, a dark, sticky syrup that clung to memory as much as it did to bread. Molasses. Thick, slow, and almost black, molasses was energy you could pour. Weekly rations turned into a dozen small mercies. A spoon stirred through hot cornmeal, a drizzle over ash cakes, a quick drink thinned with warm water for a child at dusk. Sugar was rare. Molasses was reachable. It softened bitter greens, lifted tired spirits, and made sparse plates feel intentional. Jars were guarded carefully, wiped clean, and passed around like a promise. Yet sweetness sat beside reality. Teeth ached, jars ran out early, and every drop had to count. Still, when the house smelled faintly of caramel and smoke, the room felt fuller. A moment of relief you could taste. From syrup to leaves, collards pulled from night gardens, bitter at first bite, healing by the last. Collard greens. Broad, sturdy, and bitter at first bite, collard greens were a true survival food for enslaved families. Boiled slowly with salt pork or sweetened with a touch of molasses, these tough leaves became tender, nourishing comfort. Small garden plots, tended in the quiet hours before or after back-breaking labor, gave families a rare sense of control and pride. Collards weren't just food, they were medicine, strength, and a way to coax life from the soil. The smell rising from a simmering pot carried resilience, memory, and community. Children learned preparation. Elders passed down seasoning and timing, and each meal preserved knowledge that could endure harsh conditions. Yet collards were only part of the story. From the same fields came something smaller, humbler, but just as powerful. A tiny pea, ready to fuel the next generation. Black-eyed peas. Small, humble, and hearty black-eyed peas were a staple that quietly held families together. Cooked slowly with salt pork or simmered alongside greens, they were filling, protein-rich, and endlessly versatile. Each pot carried more than nourishment. It carried ritual and routine. The clatter of wooden spoons, the warm steam rising in the kitchen, the soft chatter of children waiting for dinner. For generations, black-eyed peas symbolized hope and resilience, the ability to stretch scarce resources into sustenance. Even the smallest handful could fill a stomach and strengthen resolve, passing lessons of thrift, patience, and care from one generation to the next. Yet while peas gave strength, the next food offered a different kind of comfort. A bright orange tuber from the earth, warming hearts and bellies alike, ready to transform the table in unexpected ways. Sweet potatoes. Orange, earthy, and naturally sweet. Sweet potatoes were more than a side. They were sustenance wrapped in comfort. Baked in coals, boiled in pots, or mashed with a touch of molasses, they carried families through long days in the fields. Children brought small portions to school, while parents slipped extra tubers into pockets for later. Sweet potatoes provided energy, warmth, and even a small sweetness when sugar was scarce, a quiet reminder that life could still have flavor. The scent rising from the hearth promised relief, if only for a moment, and strengthened the bond between family and table. From the same soil that nurtured roots and tubers came another cornerstone of survival, a sturdy, golden grain, endlessly adaptable, ready to build meals and sustain generations in body and spirit. Rice. Small, pale, and unassuming, rice was a quiet hero of survival. Boiled into porridge, baked into puddings, or served alongside beans and greens, it filled stomachs and stretched scarce rations farther than almost any other food. Families measured each grain with care, knowing every handful mattered. For enslaved people, rice wasn't just nourishment, it was continuity, a thread connecting past and present. Its versatility encouraged creativity in the kitchen, and its presence reminded families that life, even under hardship, could be sustained. From the same fields that produced rice came another essential staple, hominy, coarse yet comforting, with a history as old as the plantations themselves. Its texture and flavor offered variety and resilience, ready to carry families through long days while sustaining both body and spirit. Hominy. Pale, chewy, and slightly nutty, hominy was more than a meal. It was tradition pressed into every kernel. Made from dried corn treated to last, it appeared in stews, grits, and simple porridge, carrying both flavor and resilience. Families stirred it slowly over the fire, the soft pop and hiss filling kitchens with life. Preparation was challenging, but its nourishment and versatility made it indispensable. Children learned patience as they watched kernels swell in boiling pots, while parents relied on it to feed many from very little. From coarse grains came a shift in texture and purpose. Okra, tender and sticky, quietly shaped countless meals. Its subtle flavor and binding properties made it essential in soups and stews, carrying both sustenance and a sense of continuity from one generation to the next. Okra. Slender, green, and surprisingly resilient, okra thrived where other vegetables struggled. Boiled, fried, or stewed, it added texture and heartiness to every meal. Its sticky, mucilaginous quality thickened soups and stews, turning simple ingredients into sustaining dishes for families laboring from dawn to dusk. Children tugged at pods in small garden plots, while parents relied on its dependable yield. Each meal with okra carried lessons in patience, creativity, and survival, reinforcing knowledge passed quietly from one generation to the next. Its flavor, once ordinary, now echoes a life lived with little but made whole by effort. From verdant pods and tender stems came another essential green, turnip greens. Bitter yet nourishing, they anchored tables, bringing both sustenance and a quiet reminder of endurance cultivated over generations. Turnip greens. Bitter, dark, and sturdy, turnip greens were a cornerstone of survival meals. Boiled slowly with salted pork or simmered with molasses, humble leaves became both nourishing and comforting. Families gathered around steaming pots, inhaling the earthy aroma that filled kitchens and hearts alike. Each meal carried lessons in patience, endurance, and care, linking generations who understood the value of every leaf. Children learned to chew through bitterness, tasting both hardship and sustenance in every bite. From the garden to the water came the next source of resilience: catfish. Small, plentiful, and adaptable, they provided more than protein. Rivers and streams offered a vital complement to the soil's bounty, teaching families to harvest life from every corner of their world while sustaining both body and spirit across generations. Catfish. Silvery, slippery, and abundant, catfish entered the daily lives of families on plantations with quiet importance. Caught in rivers, ponds, or creeks, they were fried, stewed, or smoked, providing vital protein for long, grueling days. The sizzle in a cast-iron skillet mingled with the aroma of cornbread baking, filling kitchens with warmth and sustenance. Children learned patience and skill by helping clean and cook the catch, while parents relied on it to feed hungry mouths from river to table. Each meal carried the quiet triumph of survival and the intimacy of shared labor, linking generations through both work and nourishment. Flowing from river to hearth came another staple: golden, crunchy hush puppies. These small fried treasures complemented every fish-filled meal, adding texture, flavor, and a sense of resourcefulness that sustained families from plate to plate. Hush puppies, cornmeal fritters. Golden, round, and crisp, Hush puppies were small pockets of comfort in an often harsh world. Made from cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt, they were fried until edges crackled and the centers stayed tender. Families shaped them by hand, laughter echoing as children rolled balls of dough before they hit the pan. Preparation was tricky. Too much heat and they burned. Too little and they stuck. But when done right, they brought a simple joy. A bite-sized reminder that even in scarcity, life could hold small pleasures. Hush puppies rarely stood alone. From the kitchen to the garden came another staple, cabbage. Humble, leafy, and nourishing, it connected families to both soil and sustenance, carrying vitamins, flavor, and the quiet lessons of care, patience, and resilience passed from one generation to the next. Wild game, rabbit, squirrel, possum. Small, nimble, and elusive, wild game brought families a taste of freedom in a life constrained by labor and rationing. Rabbits, squirrels, and possums were hunted, trapped, or foraged, turning forests and fields into both pantry and playground. The crackle of a fire and the aroma of roasting meat filled kitchens, carrying the quiet triumph of skill and patience. Every meal told a story: who caught it, how it was cooked, and the laughter or arguments that followed. Game taught families that survival required cunning, cooperation, and care, linking generations through both work and nourishment. From the forests came another lesson in sustenance, this time in sweetness. Pumpkins, bright orange and hearty, their flesh warmed hearts and bellies, offering comfort and versatility during the darkest days of the year. Cabbage. Round, leafy, and surprisingly hearty, cabbage was a staple that could stretch a meal across a week. Boiled, sautéed, or stewed with a bit of salt pork, it added bulk, warmth, and nutrition when little else was available. Families tended small garden plots, harvesting heads that promised sustenance for the table and a sense of accomplishment. Cabbage was comfort, routine, and resilience rolled into a humble leaf. Children learned patience as they watched the greens simmer, while parents relied on them to feed the family with care and creativity, turning simple ingredients into sustaining meals. Beyond garden walls, the next source of nourishment came from the wild: rabbits, squirrels, and possums. Small, elusive, and resourceful, they reminded families that survival required skill, patience, and daring, adding both protein and the quiet thrill of mastery to the table. Beans, various types. Small, humble, and endlessly versatile, beans were a lifeline on the plantation. Black beans, kidney beans, and pinto beans simmered slowly in cast-iron pots, often paired with a scrap of salt pork or a splash of molasses. Each bubbling pot was more than a meal. It was patience, care, and survival in action. Children watched the slow transformation, learning that nourishment came not from speed, but from attention and time. Beans stretched meals farther than anything else, filling bellies and giving strength for another day's labor. From simmering pots of beans came a shift towards sweetness and warmth. Sweet potatoes, golden and hearty, carried flavor and sustenance to the table, offering comfort, energy, and a reminder that even the simplest ingredients could sustain both body and spirit across generations. Sorghum syrup. Thick, dark, and deeply sweet, sorghum syrup was liquid gold on the plantation table. Drizzled over cornbread, stirred into porridge, or used to sweeten a rare treat, it carried more than flavor. It carried comfort. Families measured every drop, knowing its sweetness was precious and limited. Even the smallest taste could lift spirits after a long day in the fields. Children licked spoons clean while elders savored the deep, earthy richness that could transform modest meals into celebrations. Each jar held patience, care, and a touch of ingenuity, reflecting the skill required to turn scarce resources into sustenance and small joys. From syrupy richness came a shift to a more humble staple, cornmeal. Golden, versatile, and enduring, it formed the backbone of countless dishes, sustaining families and linking generations through both work and nourishment. Ash cakes, cornmeal cakes, cooked in ashes. Rough, simple, and smoky, ash cakes were the heart of survival meals. Made from cornmeal and water, pressed into small rounds and baked directly in hot ashes, they demanded patience and care. The faint scent of smoke mingled with the earthy aroma of corn, filling homes with warmth and sustenance. Too close to the embers, and they burned. Too far, and they stayed doughy. When done right, however, they were filling, portable, and endlessly reliable. a meal for children heading to the fields or adults laboring from dawn to dusk. From the simplicity of ash cakes came a shift to liquid indulgence. Molasses, thick and dark, transformed even the humblest dish, adding sweetness, depth, and a quiet reminder that small pleasures could coexist with hard work and sustenance, linking generations through taste and memory. Cornbread, golden, crumbly, and warm from the oven. Cornbread was more than a side. It was comfort on a plate. Made from simple ingredients like cornmeal, water, and sometimes a touch of molasses, it fed families through long days of labor. The crackle as it baked, the sweet, earthy aroma filling kitchens, carried more than food. It carried memory, patience, and quiet resilience. Children broke off pieces while parents sliced thick squares to accompany beans or greens, each bite stretching scarce ingredients into satisfying meals. From the same golden grain came another staple, bringing both texture and sustenance: hush puppies. Small, fried and crackling at the edges, they transformed humble ingredients into a versatile, hearty addition to every meal, linking kitchens and generations through shared skill, care, and flavor. Foraged berries, blackberries, blueberries, muscadines, sweet, tart, and hidden in thickets or along fence lines, foraged berries were nature's gift to families on the plantation. Children ran through brambles with sticky fingers and laughing mouths, picking blackberries, blueberries, or muscadines, while elders guided them towards safe, ripe clusters. These tiny fruits weren't just snacks. They were survival, a burst of flavor and nutrition in a world where food was scarce. Berries were eaten fresh, stirred into porridge, or made into preserves to last through lean months. Each handful carried adventure, patience, and a quiet connection to the land itself, teaching children about timing, care, and the rewards of observation. From these wild, hidden treasures came a shift toward the humble, earthy tuber. Potatoes, versatile and sustaining, anchored countless meals, carrying both nourishment and the enduring knowledge of resourcefulness from one generation to the next. Pumpkin. Round, bright, and hearty, pumpkin was more than autumn decoration. It was sustenance through long months. Baked, boiled, or mashed, it fed families when little else was available, sweetening stews or filling pies for rare celebrations. Children scooped seeds while parents stirred the flesh into meals, and each rising aroma carried warmth, nourishment, and a quiet sense of hope. Even in scarcity, pumpkin offered versatility, flavor, and energy, a humble treasure from the fields that reminded families small pleasures could coexist with survival. From the earth's soft orange roots came another form of sustenance: wild game. Rabbits, squirrels, and possums required cunning and skill to catch, offering protein and a lesson in patience, cooperation, and resilience, carrying families through both long days and generations of shared knowledge. Peanuts. Small, crunchy, and humble, peanuts were more than a snack. They were nourishment hidden in plain sight. Roasted over fires or ground into pastes, they added protein and flavor to meals that might otherwise feel sparse. Children cracked shells with sticky fingers while elders measured portions carefully, stretching a small handful into sustenance for work in the fields. Peanuts carried resilience, patience, and the quiet satisfaction of self-sufficiency. Even the shells found use, scattered to feed animals or enrich the soil, reflecting the resourcefulness required to make the most of every harvest. From this modest legume came a shift to liquid comfort. Buttermilk, tangy and creamy, offered flavor, hydration, and a soothing reprieve from long, hard days. Its presence reminded families that sustenance could nourish both body and spirit in equal measure. Grits. Soft, warm, and comforting, grits were more than a breakfast staple. They were survival on a plate. Made from coarsely ground corn and boiled slowly over a fire, they filled bellies and provided energy for long days in the fields. Families stirred the pots with care, watching the grains swell into creamy sustenance. Children learned patience, while parents relied on grits to stretch small rations into nourishing meals. A dash of salt or a pat of fat transformed simple ingredients into something satisfying and sustaining, teaching lessons in resourcefulness and care. From creamy porridge came a shift to preserved protein. Salt pork, tough, salty, and endlessly essential, could be chewed, carried, and stored, offering families both nourishment and a reminder that survival required preparation, foresight, and the careful use of limited resources. Dandelion greens. Bitter, tender, and often overlooked, dandelion greens were a survival food that carried both nutrition and resilience. Gathered from fields and garden edges, they were boiled, sautéed, or added to stews, providing essential vitamins when few other greens were available. Children learned to chew through the sharpness, discovering that even bitterness could bring strength, while elders passed down knowledge of preparation, timing, and care. Each simmering pot carried sustenance and tradition, a quiet reminder that life could be nourished directly from the earth. From these humble greens came the final note of flavor and versatility: molasses. Dark, sticky, and deeply sweet, it transformed simple meals into lasting memory, leaving a flavor that lingered long after the pot was emptied and carrying the lessons of resourcefulness, patience, and nourishment from one generation to the next. Muscadine grapes. Thick-skinned, sweet, and bursting with juice, muscadine grapes were a rare treat that brightened long, hard days. Foraged from vines along fences or in quiet woodland patches, they offered families a taste of sweetness straight from nature. Children's fingers stained purple as they popped grapes into their mouths, laughing at the sticky mess, while elders gathered clusters to make preserves that would last through winter. Each grape carried both nourishment and memory, a fleeting luxury in a life defined by labor and scarcity. From these sweet, hidden treasures came a gateway to the broader world of survival foods. Each required skill, patience, and care, offering sustenance, flavor, and the quiet lessons of ingenuity passed down through generations, with stories embedded in every pot, pan, and harvest. Which of these survival foods would you have relied on if you lived back then? Each bite tells a story of resilience, creativity, and care. Share your thoughts in the comments, and let these flavors and memories continue to inspire, connecting us to the past, one meal at a time.